example of present value calculations. The case here is one where the interest rate is 4%, and that's denoted, it's given right here. So R is 4%, and you need to look at, or you need to calculate the present value, the PV of $100 to be received 1 year from now. What is the present value? Then you look at what's the present value if the same $100 were to be received 2 years from now, and then finally 10 years from now. So basically what you're doing is, in terms of the timeline, you're saying, okay, if this is today, if you start here today, which we call time 0, 1 year from now, you're going to receive $100. What is its value today? That's one question. The second part says, this part says, what if you were to receive that $100 not here, but you were to receive 2 years from now? What is its value today? And similarly, what if instead of getting it 2 years from now, you were to receive it 10 years from now? What is its value today? Okay. So in terms of the formulas, the formula is simply take the future value, which in this case is 100. So you take the future value and you divide it by 1 plus the interest rate R in percent terms, and you raise that to the number of years, right? So if it's 1 year from now, it's raised to 1. If it's 2 years from now, it's raised to 2, and so on. So this is your 1 plus R raised to n, where this number n denotes the number of years. This is how you calculate your present value. And as you can see from these numbers, the further out in time you receive the cash flow, the less its value today, right? So if you receive $100 10 years from now, it's only worth $67 today. If you receive it 2 years from now, it's worth $92. If you receive it a year from now, it's worth a little over $96. And the reason it's worth less and less is because you have the opportunity to invest in other investments at 4%. So every time you give up that opportunity, you're missing out on something, and that's the reason the value keeps going down as you move further and further in time, as you move along this. Okay, so a couple of things here. One is, this is how you would do it using your formulas. This is how you would calculate present value using formulas. Now note what you're given here. You're given the future value, you're given the interest rate, you're given the number of years, and you're calculating present value. You could reverse it and say, if you're given the present value and you're given the interest rate and number of years, what is the future value? And we'll do that in a minute. Okay. You can also work through this exercise using your calculators and using Excel. Okay. So let's look at it using a calculator. Again, the basic problem here is 1 year from now you are going to receive $100. What is its present value today? Okay. On the calculator, remember the time value functions are on row 3, and you always start by clearing out the registry. So you always start with second FV, that clears out all the previously stored data. Okay. Then you start with n. So how many years? It's 1 year from now, so your n is 1, or 1. You input 1 and then you input n. Then you look at the next key, which is the interest rate key. In order to use that, what is the interest rate here? It's 4%. Okay. Now note here that here you've used the integer value 4, whereas in the previous formula you used 0.04. You need to remember that. When you use your calculators, it's 4. It's the integer value. So 4 is your interest rate. And then the next key is present value. So if you look on your calculators, the keys are n, I/y, present value, payment, and future value. Okay. In this case, all we have is we're given the n, we're given the interest rate, we're given the future value, and we need to compute the present value. So you can ignore the payment. So input your n, which is 1, input 4, which is your interest rate. Then you need to input your there's no payment here, so you can ignore that. You can put in 0 payment, but you don't need to do that. Then you input your future value. What is your future value? That's 100. Because why is that? Because you're receiving that in the future. This point in time times 0 is today. How much are you receiving in the future? You're receiving 100. But like we discussed in class, since all these are assumed to be payments, or they're assumed to be things that you're paying on, you put a negative 100 as your future value. So you input minus 100 future value, and then you compute CPT key, which is the first key up on the left corner on your calculators. CPT, compute present value. And when you do that, you get 96.15. Okay. Now, if the same future value were to be received 2 years from now, so instead of this, it were to be 2 years from now, what's going to happen? Everything else will stay the same, except now you have 2 as your n. Okay. So, but you start with second FV, 2 is your n, 4 is your interest rate, minus 100 is the future value, compute present value, and now it's 92.46, just like before. When you go to 10 years, again, everything else is the same. The only thing that's going to be different is n. So you have 10 as your n, and then recalculate, and you should get 67.56. Okay, so you can do it using formulas, you can do it using your calculators, and then finally using Excel. When you do it on Excel, the Excel functions will look like this. The formulas on Excel, when you type in the formulas on Excel, what you're going to get is a PV function, or what you're going to get is, or what you're going to use is a PV function. And that PV function is simply the present value function, because you're calculating the present value. When you type in this function, when you type in equals PV in Excel, it'll automatically open up this bracket, and it'll ask you for these variables. The rate, which is your interest rate, okay? It'll ask you for the number of periods, which is your number of years. It'll ask you for payment, which in this case is 0, future value, and then type. You can ignore the type for right now. I'll explain that later in the course. So if you do that, this is what you will input. Your first variable is rate, and that's going to be 0.04, just like we did in the formulas. The number of periods, number of years is just 1. The payment, there's no payment here. All there is a future value, and that's a negative. And then you can ignore the type. If you want to, you can input 0 for type, or just ignore it, close brackets. And when you do that, Excel will give you this value. When it's 2 years from now, stays the same, except the number of periods becomes 2. When it's 10 years, becomes 10. You get the same numbers, but this is using Excel. Okay. So let me take you to the Excel sheet to show you what that looks like. The Excel sheet looks like this. Okay. So what I have here is today, which is 2015, or year 0. 2016 is year 1, which is 1 year from today. And that's the first case where you're receiving $100 1 year from today. This is the second case where you're receiving it 2 years from today, and this is the third case you're receiving it 10 years from today. What we want to do is we want to calculate the present value, meaning the value as of this point in time, as of today, as of time 0. What is the value? So equals present value. Okay. Remember what I had? I had PV. I had 0.0410 minus 100. Right. So I'm going to go back to that, and that's going to be . the interest rate 0.04, number of periods 1, there's no payments, minus 100 is my future value, and I get 96.15, which is exactly what I have here. Right? If you want to do it for 2 years, so now you say present value equals present value, the rate is the same, 4%, number of periods is 2, no payments, the future value is minus 100. As I'm typing, I hope you can see the formula. Okay? 92.46, and then finally here, present value. I can input the rate like I did before, or I can just link it to this cell where I have the interest rate. I can also, if I want to, link it to the number of periods, which is 10, and then 0 is my payment, and then link it to this value. It's the same thing. Okay? So you get the present value in all 3 cases, and the numbers are consistent with what you had before. Anytime you have a problem with these Excel functions, the easy way to do it is you put equals present value, and you can see what happens here, right? I'm sorry, when you do that, when you put in present value, let's say you want to calculate the present value here, okay? You put in equals PV, right? And then it gives you a rate. You can see this function. If you don't know how to use it, just click on the PV or the function part of it, and it should take you to a screen that will actually explain to you how the function works. Okay, I'm not able to get the screen here, but this should get you to explain how the function works. Okay, it's not pulling up here for some reason. So anyway, so that's the present value functions using calculators, using Excel, and using a formula.